Hi, welcome back to Unfiltered Mommyverse. We are
Chris?
and Jules.
Okay, let me ask you. Did you ever notice walking into a room and completely forget why you went there?
Yes, it happens to me. What is funny, it happened to me that I actually went to the shower with wearing glasses on a couple of times. So yeah,
That's
I'm
great.
there.
So why is that happening?
Well, we have a perfect guest today joining us at Unfiltered Mommyverse that can explain. So let's bring our next guest.
Today we're joined by Jodi Pawluski, neuroscientist, psychotherapist, and maternal brain expert known for her research on how pregnancy and motherhood reshape the brain and impact mental health, right? And she's also mother of two and works globally as a perinatal mental health specialist, supporting both individuals and clinicians. So she is as well author of Mommy Brain and hosts a podcast, Mommy Brain Revisit. So welcome, Jodi. Thank you so much. We're very excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, Dr. Pawluski, very welcome. We are delighted. And let's start with your story. How did you become interested in mom's brain and the idea that becoming a parent basically is changing the brain?
Yeah, I actually was interested in parenting and motherhood when I was doing my undergraduate research. Interested in how parents help kids learn languages. I learned, or not languages, but learn language specifically. I did some work in a language development lab and really interested not on the child development side, but how parents are what's going on for parents during this experience. And I was very, very interested in maternal mental health as well. And really the intersection between hormones, brain, and behavior. My background is in biopsychology. And so for me, pregnancy in itself is quite fascinating because you have the most significant changes in hormones in the brain, we now know, and in behavior that you'll see during adulthood. And so, I mean, I was always really interested in how things worked growing up on a small farm and how animals worked, and had a lot of experiences watching, the animals in the spring with babies, moms and babies, and things like that. So I came at this really with an interest in parenting long before I had children, because I think pregnancy and motherhood and parenting is incredibly fascinating from a behavioral perspective, but also neurobiologically and hormonally. So that's where I started, is with this kind of idea of how can we better support moms and understand what she's going through. And I was very curious about this.
Okay, it's actually very interesting. At least for me, I'm all about it's how the brain changes, right? And I wanted to ask you about because we know currently mom brain it's very popular, right? It's we usually use it maybe as a joke or as a way to explain that memory lapses after we have after pregnancy. But what is really happening in the brain during that pregnancy and postpartum? And you think that term needs to be rebranded somehow?
Yeah, I think well, there's two different things going on here. One is how we talk about our brains as mothers or as a society, talking about brain changes across pregnancy and the postpartum period. And usually it's quite negative and talking about it as a dysfunction, memory lapses, brain fog. And then the second piece is really, what does the science show in terms of what's going on in the brain and why that's important? And so, I mean, maybe I'll start with the scientific, a really, really brief overview of what's happening to your brain. And we know from many researchers in the field now that there are significant changes across pregnancy and the postpartum period in the brain structure and function. And I'm talking here about the most recent research in humans. Of course, for probably 50 years or more, we've been studying the brain in non-human animals and how it changes with regards to motherhood. And much of what we see in humans is really building on top of what we know. And so we know that across pregnancy, there seems to be a decrease in brain volume and a decrease in the volume of certain brain areas that are important for social behaviors and understanding the needs of others. And then functionally, particularly in the postpartum period, we see an increase in activity in the brain and brain areas important for aspects of parenting. And those increases are in response to infant cues. And so you'll see a greater activity in the brain of a mother or a father compared to the brain of someone who has never mothered or been a parent in response to an infant cue. And so I think it's really important to understand that there's a lot of change happening. It's a very dynamic period in terms of neuroplasticity or a brain change across pregnancy and the postpartum period. But these changes are normal, they're healthy, they're adaptive, and they're not signifying a dysfunction. And so the research, when we look at structural changes, really people have been talking about, oh, well, if the brain shrinks, then that's a bad thing. And in fact, that research has shown that there is this decrease in brain structure across pregnancy in certain brain areas, but they're related to an increase in sensitivity towards the child. They're not related to memory changes. They're not related to stress. They're not related to mode of birth. And so these are normal, adaptive, important changes to help you bond to your baby. And I think sometimes we often take this recent science and we say, oh, this is why my brain isn't working. But I think the feeling of the brain not working has to do with how much the brain has to do when we are mothers. So, you know, the brain's changing a lot. It's really getting primed to learn how to parent, to focus on the cues of the baby, because that's really important, that it figures out what the baby needs, because the baby can't do it on its own. And so you add on top of that all the expectations that are maybe, you know, societal, cultural, familial expectations of how you're supposed to do stuff as a mother. Your brain is not going to do it all. In addition to the sleep deprivation, because you're the primary or default parent, nobody else is helping you. In addition to, of course, hormones changing, in addition to actually just postpartum recovery. For some, you know, there's a lot of pain for some, there's a lot going on, you know, and you could add, in addition to, you know, many other factors that a mom can be experiencing. And so I think we forget that the brain is finite in its capacity to function, and it's doing a lot when we become mothers, but we often don't acknowledge that, and we just pile on, oh, she can handle it, she's supposed to know, she'll figure it out, all these different things. And so the brain is going to start to pick and choose what it's going to focus on and what it can do. This is the way I look at that memory piece. I think we need to acknowledge that women are struggling with how their brain is functioning. That's super, super important, but it shouldn't be so hard.
And you said that the brain is changing. So are those changes lasting changes, or it's all more hormonal, and with the time it will go back to the state it was before becoming a parent?
Yeah. People often ask, like, is my brain always going to be like this? The beauty of the brain is that it does change a lot, right, throughout our lives. And during this period of time in adulthood is changing the most. You know, it's really a dynamic period of time in terms of brain changes. The question of whether or not the brain will be the same in, say, structure or function or what have you, this is a question I often get. But in fact, what I think is happening, and of course we need more research on this, is that the brain changes are really dynamic, you know, over the years postpartum, depending on the child's needs, right? And the child's development, as well as various factors within your life. Right? Because our brain is always responding to relationships, environmental factors, things like this. So your brain's not going to look, let's say, the same way 1 month postpartum 2 years postpartum, 10 years postpartum. I mean, there is some research showing that there's some consistency in this fine tuning or refinement of specific brain areas that can last potentially up to 6 years postpartum. But we need more replication of this research and greater understanding really of the dynamic impact of parenting on the brain across the lifespan. But it does mark the brain, essentially. You know, people who are parents, mothers into their 70s, their brains will look a little bit different than a person who has never had children, right? But it's not going to look the same as 1 month postpartum.
Right. And this change only is for like in mother's brain, or also fathers and, for example, adoptive parents are going through those changes or similar changes?
Yeah, so really, in terms of structure, that intense refinement is most significant in those individuals who have been pregnant. However, we know there are structural changes in fathers as well, you know, a decrease in the brain size of certain brain areas. And I'm talking about a decrease here of about 1%, right? 1% in these brain areas in women, and an overall decrease in the brain size of about maybe 4%. And in men, there's some research showing there's about a 1% decrease in certain brain areas in size. But in function, we see an increase. And in fact, if a parent, there's research showing that if a parent is the primary caregiver, whether it's a male or female or mother or father, the brain areas important for parenting, such as the amygdala, show very exact same response to infant Q. So this activity of the brain can be incredibly similar or between mothers and fathers, adoptive parents, you know, birthing parents, what have you. I think it has to do, and the research is showing it has to do with experience parenting, the activity changes. And this should make sense to all of us because we all know people, or perhaps we are adoptive parents, we are non-birthing parents, right? And we still love our kids and we still care for our kids and we still know what they need. I mean, we all have to learn how to do this, right? So our brain are adapting as parents to the needs of our child. You just see more significant changes in pregnant individuals, but that doesn't mean you see better parenting. Does that make sense? Part of, I think, the brain changes have to do with the physiological changes, right? It's just normal, it happens. This is how it is. And then it's really interaction with child that's important.
Let me see, what I think as well is like when we are pregnant, like when someone is through pregnancy, like it's kind of, you became aware sooner than someone else, like talking about the father or adoption, because you are already having there, you start feeling it, like it's not just like the hormones and everything, but in a way like you are attached already before it comes to this world, right? So maybe that can explain it a bit, like not all of it, but you know, and it's not always like that, but
yeah, exactly. I think, like, I remember when I birthed my daughter, and I remember for me, I just wanted to keep her like close because she'd been in me, right, this whole time. And so I kind of had a different relationship with her than my husband, who of course had felt her move and everything, but he was so eager to hold her that I had to really make the decision to hand her to him because I felt really this bond, right? And I think that has to do with that experience of feeling baby and connecting with baby, that again, not all mothers have this experience at all, right? There's very different experiences when it comes to how we feel about pregnancy and birth, and even in the postpartum, it can take a number of days, if not weeks, for some moms to feel really attached to their babies, right? Which happens. I mean, and that's just the beauty of being human. So, but there is perhaps something playing a role in some of us where we already have this relationship with baby before it arrives.
Yeah. And then what happened as well, like we have the other side, when I snap at my kids now, sometimes some very small tiny things, right? So that's the maternal, it's like, feels like the maternal brain like becomes more sensitive to stress and threat, right? And as I think we said it before, like sleep deprivation amplified that.
So how I think of it often is that the maternal brain is navigating a lot more things. So the window of tolerance or its bandwidth becomes much smaller. And so all of a sudden, you have children you're taking care of, you're doing a lot of different things and you're trying to manage. And so you don't have as much room to process, let's say, emotions in your example as well, right? To stay calm, because you already probably have 2 kids under your feet. Who knows, you're trying to like get on the phone, make an appointment, cook something, have to feed the cats, whatever. There's a lot going on. And so, I think this is also part of that, realizing that we can very easily as mothers end up doing quite a bit, and our brains then can't function as we would like them to do. And so this comes into that piece of mental load, and also being able to share, let's say, share tasks or offload tasks. I don't know, it depends on the individual and their situation, what you can do. But I think we often, when we're feeling anger or sadness or anxiety often consistently, and is starting to interfere with our life, for me, that's a sign that the brain needs something. It needs more of something. It could be many different things. Like you said, it could be sleep, it could be iron, it could be privacy, it could be social activity, whatever. But that means your brain really is demanding some attention, because it can't go on like this without something more.
Yeah, like for example, in my case, like I feel like it's when I cannot handle it anymore, in a way that I need a break. I need like a few hours for myself, because my husband comes home from work like late as well, so it's mostly me with the kids all the time, and then it's the weekend, like it's 24/7. So I feel like when I can't take it anymore, it's because I need like a few hours for myself, like, and then to reset.
And this is also great to know, right? Because then you do know what will be helpful. And so some people don't know. They have to, it takes a while to figure it out. But it's important to realize when you're gonna hit the wall, right? Or like not being able to manage anymore.
Yeah, and even though we realize that we need a break, sometimes we are, as moms, unable to relax. And is there like scientific explanation to that, or is just like we are unable to let go the mental load, also the sleep deprivation, the stress, everything is come together, and we just cannot relax fully as our husbands probably can more?
Yeah, I think this is a social issue and not necessarily a brain one, right? We're meant often as mothers to do everything and be responsible for it. So it's hard to shut off, especially if we don't feel that things are getting done as they should, or that children are being cared for. So we know that women, for example, there's some research, women who go back into working outside the home do better if they know that their children are well taken care of, if they know that their partner is sharing the load, right? And so, yeah, saying, oh, I need a break, it has to be a break where you can just step away and don't have to think about things, right? And that's easier said than done. And in many households, it is the women and the mothers who continually carry the mental load. They do the planning, they even do the execution. So they also have the physical task, the physical load. So they're planning it, they're thinking about it, they're managing the emotions of everyone, and they're actually doing the task. And so I think this is something that, in many cases, it would be very helpful if this was modified within the home. But this is actually a bigger structural and societal issue, right? We've grown up with the possibility of being a woman and doing everything, right? Having careers, what have you. But our partners, if we're in, if we have a male partner, has not grown up with that same thing because he hasn't been taught that he could also care for kids and vacuum and clean the house, right? On average. And so then you end up with women, especially we see women who are working outside the home, they're actually doing so much more because they're still carrying the load of all the tasks that they have to do inside the home. Right. And so, I mean, I'm speaking broadly. Of course, every individual experience can be different, but I think this is something that we need to be aware of. And I know there's the book Fair Play that was published a few years ago that is really talks about this issue in detail and was quite popular and still is. But I think there's something to be said about figuring out how to get more from your partner, but also let them do more.
Yeah, just not controlling everything all the time, learning how to
Delegate.
control. Yeah, delegate. Yeah, because we in our mind we just know we're doing things better the right way for us, and it's hard to let it go.
Yeah, and this is what sociologists will call maternal gatekeeping, right? We often are closing the gate. We have to do this ourselves. We're not letting other people do it. And so I think this is an important thing to think about is what can you let go? What can he be responsible for? And also we have to remember that kids really benefit from interacting with other adults and also learning how other adults do things in different ways, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really, really important, not only for the child's development, but also for the development of the adult who is the parent or aunt, uncle, grandparent. They're going to have their own way of doing something. That's great, right? Why not? Kids can learn from that. And they also need to interact with the child in their own way for their brain to really learn how to parent or caregive. And so there's benefits to just letting people figure out what to do with your kids.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But then like that, I don't know if you call it lack of support, because so many times we are the ones that are pushing it away, right? We are the ones that we don't want to delegate or we don't want to let them do. But maybe if we'll have that lack of support, moms won't be feeling like so overwhelmed and maybe resentful toward our partner.
Yeah, I think support is really important. Of course, we're not supposed to parent alone. I mean, we're a social species, humans. But one thing we have to remember is that the support has to be perceived as supportive. So just because the mother-in-law comes over every Tuesday doesn't mean that that's social support, right? So it has to work for you. And so I think that's one thing that's really important, is have support that the mother values as supportive. And then of course that support, I mean, it's ideal if you can get it from your partner, if you have a partner, right? That he at least can help with certain tasks and do them, be responsible for them, where you don't have to think about them anymore. And then you can get support from also other people, right? But this has to be support you feel is helpful. It's not helpful to have someone come over who's like, what can I do for you? And then you're just like, okay, well, here's the list, right? Sometimes it's just easier to do it yourself. Yeah. It depends. And, this also comes into that topic of a village, right? We talk about it's a village, and then some moms are like, but I don't have a village. And for me, I sometimes think the village can be many different things and many different people. It might be like the pizza delivery guy. It might be a cleaning lady. It might be the librarian, because they're always so helpful with the kids when you go on the toddler reading hour or whatever it is, right? It doesn't have to be specifically family or friends. It can be made up of different individuals that are very, very helpful in their own way. So I think we definitely need to interact and have the support of other people, but that can look really different for different people.
I absolutely agree. I wanted to say that in our podcast, we spent quite a lot of time speaking about postpartum depression and anxiety in the previous episodes. And if you would have to explain in a simple terms what is happening in mom's brain during postpartum depression, how could you explain it to us?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to explain to you, just summarizing some of the research in terms of association. So we don't have any research that shows like your brain does this and then you end up depressed, or you end up depressed and then your brain does this, right?
Okay.
What we do know is that there is an association. So there's a relationship, but we don't know the cause of it, between brain changes and postpartum depression, which has been the most researched. Postpartum depression, a little bit of research on postpartum anxiety, some research on postpartum psychosis as well. But generally what we're seeing from the research is a couple of things are important. One, there is a uniqueness to the neurobiology of postpartum mental illness or postpartum depression, if we want to be specific to postpartum depression. So there is a uniqueness to the neurobiology in that very similar brain areas are being affected as brain areas in major depression in outside of the postpartum period, but how those brain areas are actually acting and responding is different.
Okay.
So this is important. So we've been talking about this and we've written about this over the years about this kind of uniqueness. We also know that some of the brain areas involved in postpartum depression are also brain areas important for parenting, right? And so that makes sense because often there's more difficulty with parenting in individuals who are struggling with mental illness in the postpartum period. And so those are two important pieces to this understanding of the brain when it comes to postpartum mental illness. Now, if we're going to talk specifically about activity or function or structure, what seems to be coming out of the literature in terms of structural changes is that, in fact, individuals with postpartum depression don't have the same degree of fine-tuning or shrinkage, if you want to use that term, but fine-tuning of the brain structure compared to women without depression. So there's something going on there structurally. It's not clear. And again, we need more research. And then in terms of function, what's often happening is there's a hyperactivity in the amygdala, for example, this brain area that's really a hub of the parental brain neurocircuitry that's important for emotion regulation, among other things. But there's this hyperactivation of the amygdala in response to infant cues in women who are depressed. And you don't see that in non-mothers who are depressed. You only see this in mothers who are depressed. And so this is also where that uniqueness comes from, right? So there's something about the brain. We see that women who are struggling with depression have a different kind of way of their brain being activated in response to infant cues. And so, of course, like any mental illness, there's always a biological component. And I think it's really important to remember that the brain is changing during this time. And then there is this association with differences in brain changes in those individuals that are depressed or anxious, or other mental illness in the postpartum period. And so it's really important, I think, to understand this further so that we can develop better preventative measures, better treatments that are targeting these brain changes, and better understanding of really the neurophysiological changes that are associated with postpartum depression or anxiety.
Okay, that's very interesting. As you say, like the brain changes, like when we are learning, like learning parenting, and as well, like it changes when you have the postpartum depression, right? So I wanted to ask you, like, how can someone tell the difference between I am adapting to motherhood and I need clinical support?
Yeah, this is a good question. Often, I think it's really important that we recognize that there's a normal range of emotions and feelings across pregnancy and the postpartum period. That's normal, right? But there shouldn't be consistent periods, daily struggles with anxiety, intrusive thoughts, rage. These, if it's happening for more than a week or two, crying every day for long periods, wishing you weren't there anymore, this is time to seek support. if, you have a lot of emotions, let's say, but overall you're happy about things going, in your life, you're able to regulate and feel okay most of the time, but you have a blip once in a while in, sadness or anger. I mean, I would say this is fine, normal, but if it's persistent, if the mood is persistent or the emotion is persistent, if it's interfering in your relationships, if you're not able to control it.
We're kind of talking about extreme emotions, let's say, no? Like very
Yeah,
extreme
more
ones or
extreme
strong ones.
emotions. Although sometimes I feel like things like sadness or intrusive thoughts, sometimes we don't feel as extreme, right? I mean, if there's a concern that you think you're not adapting well to in pregnancy and the postpartum period, and you're feeling like really that this isn't normal and you're not feeling well, always check in with the healthcare provider, just to see, right? There's questionnaires also available online to give an indication if you're depressed, having high symptoms of depression or anxiety. The Edinburgh Perinatal Depression Scale is one. I think that it's really important early on, if you think this isn't like not going well for you, to seek out support. However, that being said, I think many people are just like, but I thought this was normal. Many moms,
Yeah.
right? It's normal to, and it's just shouldn't be that hard. I'm sorry. It's not normal to struggle, to be in pain, to stay in a dark room for days on end, for your breast to be like in so much pain, for you to be enraged. If you're not sleeping, that's another one. If you're not sleeping at all, if you don't feel the need to sleep, there's different types of risk factors and signs, and it's time to seek support if you have any of them. And most countries will have, well, I shouldn't say most countries, but there are some very good resources like Postpartum Support International that can really provide you with further support and understanding about when it's beginning to look like it's a mental illness versus normal. But if you feel it's not normal, then it's not normal for
Yeah.
you. That's it.
I think for me, it was week 2 after giving a birth. I was like, okay, this is not how it's supposed to be. I think it's not just the baby blues, but something is going on. So I was like, okay, it's time to search and find someone to help me. But it was a COVID time, so it took me actually over a year to get to the therapy. So it was a bit hard, but I would like to ask you, in connection to postpartum depression, your recent research. I think there was 2 papers I found, 2024 and 2025. You were researching the brain-gut connection,
Yeah.
and probiotic. In this specific one was lactocacei bacillus,
Yep.
HN001.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, can you tell us what does it mean for mothers for the future, and how promising is it? Because now when the woman gets pregnant, she is recommended to take folic acid. Would it be recommended also to check if she would need some probiotics to maybe support her gut and hopefully in the future maybe reduce the postpartum depression or anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's so much benefit to understanding proper gut health, right? And also for nutrient health. We know that many women who are pregnant and postpartum actually have low thyroid hormone, low iron. Those things can affect your mental health. So if you haven't had your iron checked at all during pregnancy or the postpartum period, or your thyroid hormone levels, get them checked, because they can really, really impact how you feel. And then on top of that, for me, gut health is really, the gut brain connection is really interesting, because what if we could target the gut with probiotics or other, prebiotics or symbiotics, like, other groups of kind of microbes that could impact our brains. I don't think probiotics will ever be a cure for major depression, but I think that they can really shift mood, potentially in pregnancy and the postpartum period, just to help moms support her mental health a bit better, right? And so I think in the future, I don't know if we'll get to the point where they'll be prescribed because they are over the counter, right? And so
Yeah.
there's a whole issue around that. But I think that there is a value in understanding which probiotics and combinations of them can be beneficial for mental health in the perinatal period. And we can tap into more of this, I think, definitely when it comes to probiotics or prebiotics and symbiotics, as well as herbal remedies. I mean, different herbal remedies out there or different that are used in different countries, right? And have been for hundreds of years, and be really interesting to have more research on what they're doing and how they're acting, and then be able to provide something that can be beneficial for mothers with fewer side effects, right? Than a medication. That being said, I think we always will have a place for medications. They will always be needed, but there is something about the need to develop better interventions in terms of these types of over-the-counter kind of nutrient supplements to improve maternal mental health. That's one thing, but we also have a lot of structural change in society, right? To really, if we're truly going to improve mental health of mothers, we need to kind of look at this on many different levels. But providing something easy like a probiotic that can alleviate or protect you against depression or anxiety in the postpartum period, yeah, this would be great, right?
Yeah. I really found it very interesting, and I wish I knew about it before I got pregnant, because I recently had my microbiome checked and I didn't have the good bacteria at all, even though I was taking probiotics, but my gut flora was so destroyed that they were not able to grow. So I had to start with the prebiotic first, kind of heal my gut. But it's extremely interesting, the research you've done. So I hope more practitioners will be talking about it and maybe suggesting check your microbiome or take probiotics, check how it works for you. So yeah, that's very good.
I think it's a really exciting area of future research. And so, it's fascinating to think that we can change how we're feeling by changing our gut, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
Yeah, and let me ask you, Jodi, has your research changed the way you parent, or has becoming a parent changed the way you see your research? How is it connected for you?
How is it connected? How is it connected? This is a good question, because I was doing this research quite some time before I had children. That's a good question. So I would say one thing I definitely prepared for was for mental health struggles in the postpartum period when I was pregnant, because I knew this could happen. I also had a history of anxiety and of intrusive thoughts. And so I made sure that I knew where I could go if I wasn't going to feel well. That was number one. Number two is I made sure that I liked my healthcare providers. And I actually switched gynecologists because I had one that was, not nice.
Not recommended.
I mean, you're recording, so I won't say a swear word, but I'm just going to say, he was very forceful and it was horrible. And I switched. So I really made sure that I had healthcare providers that I trusted and that I felt comfortable with. And then I knew where I could turn if I was struggling with my mental health. The second thing for me was really important that I continue my career and that my husband was involved. And so really early on, I left him alone with our daughter, went for a walk, went for an hour or whatever. He was really into it, but I just needed to get out so he could sort out himself with her alone, right? Without me. And so I think that was really important for me and for us, and for all of us. I have two children. And so those were two things I knew I needed, and that were important to me. Not necessarily perhaps because of my research, but because of how I wanted to live my life and what I knew about motherhood. And has it informed my parenting, I would say probably not so much. I mean, the thing is we're often discussing, I guess, concepts in society and what in my household. So we often are like, oh, another thing came out on how your brain is mushy as a mother. And then my husband's like, oh, here we go. And I'm like, yeah, I wonder where that came from. It's another article because we love to talk about women as being dysfunctional. That's what our society loves. And so, yeah, so we often have conversations around these topics. But I think for me, it was also, knowing that his brain was changing and that he could parent. He could do everything I could do, except for he couldn't breastfeed, but he could give a bottle. It was, a game changer. And I actually grew up knowing this. I mean, my dad was always very active. My grandparents, I mean, my grandma, my aunt, she said this best. She's like, yeah, she was a bra burner before we were burning bras. Like, she was a feminist 100 years ago, right? And she never cooked breakfast for my grandpa ever. Once they retired, I never saw this. He would get his own things. He was like blind. He would heat up his own food. I grew up seeing very strong women, my mom included, do their things, take time for themselves, not cater to the men in their lives, and also make the men in their lives take care of the kids. So I grew up in a very different kind of scenario than probably many women today. And I'm thankful for that, because I saw men who were very active in home life and women who very much took care of themselves in many ways, and had their, did what they enjoyed, and it didn't revolve around their children. So I also felt very, very loved and cared for. And so I didn't feel any neglect from my parents or my mom going out with her friends for dinner and things like this, right? So, but I think there's those elements because I didn't grow up wanting or needing mother to define me. And so it's part of who I am, but it's not the whole piece. And because I know that we can all parent, and I know that I need to share it with other people, and it's better for me and the children, then I think it was more easy for me to incorporate that into my life early on. But I think this can be really different if you've been raised to have children. It can be a lot harder than to find your way and the support you need and the outlets you need to really find who you are.
Yeah, it's very interesting the way what you had at home, right? What you saw, because as you say, not for many people it's like that. As at least in here, like in Spain, and my husband is Romanian, he says the same as well, right? It's always like the grandma in the house was cooking while the rest of the family was there. Then the grandfather was sitting at the table, was doing nothing, like, let's say in that moment, right? She was serving everyone, then she could sit, then she will continue serving everybody else. It's like women never rested, right? It was always doing something in the house. So I remember myself when I was a kid, I'm like 5 years older than my brother. And I remember my father asking me, take your brother's plate to the kitchen after we had dinner. And my mom was like, no, in this house, everyone take their own plate, But was difficult back then for them to understand that, because they always saw it like that in their house.
Yeah. And I think that this is a piece, it makes it more challenging if you haven't had that, to actually realize that it makes it more challenging, I guess, to change those social norms when you haven't seen them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so,
or maybe when you get married, you believe that it's going to be like that. You had that at home. You as a woman think you still have to do everything. Depends on where you live as well, the society you have around you. So it's another more mental load for us.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not advocating to okay, everyone who's listening, stop doing what you're doing. But I think there's an important awareness we should have about who's taking on what and why within the household. And of course, we also can't deny the fact that many men have been raised not to be allowed to have emotions, really, and not be allowed to be sensitive. And they don't maybe know how to fold laundry, and it's like a new thing for them or whatever, because they were never shown that. And that can be really hard to try something new when you never grew up doing it, right? So, but for me, I also think this is really important. I have a son and a daughter, that both of them do know how to do everything, right? And they do everything, and they also see it in our household as well. But that being said, some of these things can't change in your household, are very limited, but then it's really important to realize if you're feeling your brain isn't working as it should, then it's telling you it needs something. So what does it need, and what can you give it, essentially? And I think that's really important, because there's different things that it can need, right? It's not just, there's not always one, or there isn't only one solution. There's always a few.
And I really like what you said. It's very important that you mentioned it, that you were preparing yourself in case of postpartum depression or anxiety. So we always, when we get pregnant, we are so happy and cheerful, and we see what is going to be beautifully our life look like after the baby arrives. But many times we don't prepare ourselves, or at least have a contact where to go in case something like that happened. But before we close, I would like to ask you, we read on your website that you are running a perinatal neuroscience training. Could you tell us a little bit more about it, and who is it dedicated for?
Yeah, so I actually have two things I want to share with you. One is I am a therapist, and I'm the lead for the perinatal and reproductive mental health team in the Bergenstein group. And so we provide online therapy for women. It's women's health specialty. So just so you're aware of that. There's two things I have going on. One, I haven't advertised yet, so this will be the first. I'm doing a workshop for moms, a 6-week workshop for moms to really learn about mom brain, matrescence, and how to, support your brain health. So this, I'll probably maybe next week have the advertising out, but it would be for April. So that's for moms specifically. It's not a therapy group, it's a workshop group, 1 hour meetings across 6 weeks to really learn about what you're going through and how you can support yourself. So there's that. I also do a training for healthcare providers or anyone interested. It's for non-continuing education credits. So often we need these as healthcare providers, and that's the Perinatal Neuroscience Foundations. And this is a course, I'm doing it over, it's about 9 hours over 2 days. And that's going to be the end of May. And this is really where we delve into the science of parenting, motherhood, perinatal mental health, treatments and interventions, what we know in terms of the brain research, and in addition to learning tools of how to work with clients and how to really use this information about how the brain changes to inform the moms that you're working with and improve your skills as a practitioner.
That's great. And
yeah,
thank
very
you for
interesting.
Advertising the workshop for moms. That's very interesting. We're definitely gonna check it out.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll send you a link once I have it up and going. We're just in the planning process now.
Now I just want to make some, I just saw, I think last a few hours, or maybe it was yesterday, that you share a post about, I have it written here, that 70% of moms never heard about the word matrescence.
Yeah.
That it's a very important word, because it's telling us it's the process how to become a mom, right? Like the process of becoming a mom.
Becoming a mother is a term, like we have adolescence. Matrescence is a term for the transition into motherhood. And there's also the word patrescence for becoming a father. The same person who coined the term matrescence also did patrescence. But you're talking about the campaign that's out by Peanut and Tommy Tippy to get matrescence into the dictionary. So you can go to change.org and look up matrescence and sign the petition to get this word in the dictionary, because it's not in the dictionary, right? And we have other weird things in the dictionary, like isn't 6-7 in the dictionary or something ridiculous? So a lot of these words become part of the dictionary because of their popularity. So obviously matrescence isn't there yet, but I think it's a word that really is important that we should have in the dictionary, because it can really give a name to what so many women are experiencing, and it's really is a time of transition.
It is very important, and I was when I saw it's 70% of people they never heard about it. I was
I haven't.
It's a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I
you
haven't.
No?
Seriously. No. This is the first time when I saw your post as well, like that's the first time.
Oh,
So
here in
sign the
Spain?
petition.
I will
Yeah, here in
definitely.
Spain, like people is talking about it like for the last year, I think, like it's everywhere. It's that word is everywhere, and every podcaster that it's all about moms and motherhood is talking about it. Like we're trying to give it voice and like it's sharing and like that's why I was shocked. Like it's 70% of people when in here, like it's so popular at the moment, you know, like it's everywhere. Like
Yeah, but I also, because I know in France also there's a podcast called La Maîtresse, right? Like it's been around for 5 years, and so it's a word that's used here, but I don't know how much. I mean, it depends who I guess you're talking to. But I would say, I mean, I would be curious in Spain if you do a general population survey about who actually knows what the word means, because sometimes we assume everybody knows because that's who we're interacting with, but then you go out on the street and people have no idea.
they don't know.
I wonder what that word means in German. I'm afraid to even think about it, how long it is.
I have a book. No, I was gonna say there's a book. No, it's called The Myths of Mother Instinct in German. So no, I don't know if you have a word for it in German yet.
I'll look it up.
Let's look for it. Okay, just a quick, like, just to close this, like, what is one thing that every overwhelmed mom should know about her brain?
Okay, I think a couple of things is one, your brain can only do so much, right? And so I think it's really important to think of our brain as needing nurturing, right? And I think that's really important. So when your brain is not feeling like it's doing what it should, again, it probably needs to be tired a little bit. And so sometimes that can feel really like another impossible feat to do. But if your brain isn't functioning, you're not going to be functioning very well, right? So, yeah.
Totally.
And could you tell us when our listeners and viewers could find you on Instagram or your webpage?
Yeah, so I have a webpage, it's jodipawluski.com. I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn at Dr. Jodi Pawluski. Those are the two or the main places you can probably find me. You can also always email me. If you have any questions, you can do that through my website. You can find me or through Instagram and LinkedIn. You can message me.
That's perfect.
Podcast, right?
And your
And I have a
yes.
podcast. I have a book. The book's in French, English, Chinese, and out in Greek soon.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I have my podcast where I'm interviewing other neuroscientists who do research in this area. I also have a Substack for those of you who are on Substack, where I write pieces, and right now I'm walking people through the Parental Brain, which is a very dense textbook that's not overly enjoyable to read, but I'm making brief summaries on there
Okay.
for access about the neuroscience of parenting. So I try to do a lot of different things and provide resources for everyone so that they can learn more about how the brain is changing with motherhood and parenthood in general.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Pawluski. It was a pleasure speaking with you and finding out all the information. It was very knowledgeable. Thank you so much.
Thank you
It was
for
very
having
nice.
me.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Wow, what a knowledgeable episode. We are very grateful to Dr. Pawluski to spend time with us and share her knowledge. And it's amazing to find out that our brain during pregnancy and motherhood or even parenthood for our partners is changing, is growing. So that's amazing.
Yes, I feel like such interesting subject, like how the brain like rewires, like it's amazing. So yeah, and I have to say, like, it's just a reminder of how we feel, right? All like the rage or the overwhelm or all we can feel. If you feel related when I'm saying this, like, just let you know that you are not, I won't say broken, but like it's okay. We are all going through that. We are learning how to parent and our brain is changing. So we need to have a bit of patience with ourselves.
Yeah, that's absolutely, you're right, Christina. And also, if you feel like especially you just became a mom and you feel a little bit off, or you feel like you're not yourself 100%, and it's something that is happening for week 2, 3, please seek help, and you can find some resources down below in the description we share with you. So just remember, you're not alone, and asking for help, it's okay. And the brighter, better days are there ahead, even though if you cannot see it just yet.
Yeah, they are. You'll get there, okay? We all get there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and of course, like if you know someone who is in the same spot as you are, just please share, and I'm sure they'll learn something that they didn't know about this, because we actually did.
Yeah, exactly. Let us know what you think, and comment under this episode, share and like, and we are here for you.
And of course, just a reminder, because it's a new thing we're doing. If you wanna talk without being seen, we have our group on Facebook, our community, let's say, for you, for everybody who wants to ask or vent or like whatever you need, guys. Like just go there, okay? It's in Filter Mommyverse. Just group in Facebook. Just look for it.
Yeah, you can share anonymously, you can comment anonymously, and it's just a safe space for other moms to feel less alone. And also want to mention that you can, of course, watch us on YouTube, but we are also available on Spotify, where it's a video and audio, and also on Apple Podcasts. So you can find us everywhere. Yay!
Everywhere you go. Of course, always, like Instagram, TikTok, whatever you are in, we are there, okay? So take care.
Be kind to yourself.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.